Excluded my spoiled niece from our annual trips with her siblings, now facing online shaming orchestrated by my brother and his wife. I grew up in the Midwest, working class, where we had what we needed but were never well off. I have a brother, Jason, who's 8 years older than me, and our parents are now in their 70s. When I was still in high school, Jason married Tiffany, who, there's no way to sugarcoat it, was and is an utter train wreck. Heavy drinker, constant partier, and goodness knows what else, but she was gorgeous and my brother. Well, let's just say he was a bit of a dweeb. Together, they had 3 kids, Jace, Jeff, and Hannah. By the time Hannah was born, the marriage was already collapsing. They made a last-ditch effort to patch things up but ultimately divorced. Life took its usual mess of twists and turns. Jason started dating Jenny while fighting with Tiffany over custody. Since Tiffany had always stayed home, she got alimony and child support, and Jason buried himself in work. I liked Jenny at first. She didn't have Tiffany's looks, but she was kind, well-educated, had a great job. For a while, I thought my brother had finally found his match. But it wasn't easy for her, stepping into a family where the kids were clinging to the idea of their mom and didn't want anything to do with her. The divorce had wrecked all 3 of them. Jenny got pregnant pretty quickly, and then Daisy was born. They married soon after. Then things really started to shift. Jace, Jeff, and Hannah began refusing to go to Tiffany's. She was spiraling, always drunk, random men in and out, and eventually she left town altogether, disappearing from their lives. Suddenly Jenny and Jason had 3 hurting older kids full-time, plus a newborn. I tried to be sympathetic, who wouldn't find that hard? But then Jenny stopped working, saying she'd only be a stay-at-home mom for her kid. Jason was working himself to death, 70 hours a week, and her parents chipped in financially, but Jenny made sure she held the reins over the money. And from then on, it was like Daisy, Jenny, and Jason became their own separate family, doing everything together, vacations, dinners, even small outings, and the older kids just got left behind. It made my skin crawl, and I told Jason plenty of times how disgusting it was, but he just shrugged and said he'd do anything to keep Jenny happy so the marriage wouldn't implode like the last one. I found his attitude gross, if I'm being honest. And 10 years ago, I wasn't much better myself. I was younger, struggling just to get by, and living halfway across the world. It was easier to minimize my brother's failings as a parent and just try to support the kids when I could. In hindsight, that attitude disappoints me, but I did make an effort. When Jason and Jenny refused to pay for Jace to learn to drive, even though Jenny never drove the kids anywhere, our mom taught him and I bought him a battered old car. We had to shame Jason into even putting Jace on his insurance, and after that, Jason made him pay for it. When Jeff came of age, the same deal. They shared the car, used it to get themselves and Hannah to school and activities. After my wife and I got married, the kids became our sole beneficiaries in our will. We learned from a comment Jenny made that they planned to leave the older kids barely the legal minimum. Everything else goes to Daisy. So we made sure to look out for the 3 of them where my brother and Jenny fell short. 6 years ago, my wife and I decided that whenever we traveled home to the States, we'd start taking Jace, Jeff, and Hannah on little trips with us. Nothing extravagant, we're not child-free billionaires, just 2 women who are comfortably well off and care about these kids. The trips have been things like a week hiking in Utah or exploring Florida. Every year, the kids have the time of their lives, and we plan these vacations around the same time Jason takes Jenny and Daisy somewhere, so there's no weird feelings about being left out. So far, it's worked beautifully. This year, everything changed. Normally we'd go in the summer, but Jace landed an internship, so we bumped our annual trip to the fall destination, Maine, for some classic leaf peeping. I called Jason to give him the dates, didn't want to mess up anyone's fall break plans, and he hit me with a curveball, that Daisy should be included on our trip now. Turns out, Jenny's parents made some bad investments and can no longer pay for their vacations. Jenny is job hunting, and so Daisy isn't getting her usual trip this year. There's no way I'm taking Daisy. And I know people will judge me for saying this, but that child is spoiled and mean as a snake. She's the kind of kid who will look her siblings, my nephews and niece, in the face and announce, "You're not my siblings, you're Tiffany's kids." On holidays, if she doesn't get more than everyone else, she throws hour-long tantrums. She once told my wife and I we were going to hell. Yes, she was young and repeating some awful things she'd heard from Jenny's side of the family. Jenny actually disciplined her for that, which is a rare miracle. But with everything else, it just stuck with me, and since Jenny does everything for her, she's a slob. I honestly hope she grows out of it, I really do, but as it stands, I have zero desire to bring her on vacation. So I told Jason we'd stick with the usual 5 of us, my wife, the 3 older kids, and me. He suggested sending Jenny to help, absolutely not, or our mom, bless her, but she's about to get a hip replacement and would sooner eat glass than go on a New England road trip right now. Besides, the logistics are a nightmare, a car full of people, probably needing a second, and the truth? I just don't want to. Now, of course, Jason and Jenny have decided that if they can't get their way, they'll go scorched earth. They've started shaming us online. Honestly, it's working with Jenny's friends and family, but even my dad told me to hold my ground, and if you knew him, you'd know how rare that is. But then, my wife pulled me aside with a question that stopped me cold. are we really any better than Jenny if we start excluding Daisy like she always excluded the older kids? Before, by taking the 3 of them, we were balancing out what they'd lost, but if I draw the line here, am I just creating a new kind of unfairness? She told me to think long and hard about the health of my relationships and our family's future. She said, "It's your decision, but promise me you'll really consider what's the right thing to do." My instincts still say to leave Daisy behind. But she's only 10. She's being shaped by the worst role models, but the bad behavior isn't really her fault. The thought gnaws at me, will leaving her out make me just as heartless as Jenny? Is it evil to exclude her on these trips? Or have I just been doing my best to make up for years of my brother's neglect? I can't shake the question, would taking only the older 3 make me an evil aunt? Update 1. Things have really escalated, and I feel like I need to set the record straight. First off, I want to clarify something important about my niece Daisy. She isn't some spoiled monster child. She can get bratty, sure, but she's also genuinely sweet, funny, and caring. She's the only grandchild who's stuck with the church choir my mom runs, even though I'm pretty sure she doesn't actually love music that much. But she does it for my mom. Every year, she calls me and my wife on our birthdays, making sure not to miss it. And when their old dog couldn't go upstairs anymore, Daisy literally dragged her mattress down to the living room every night and slept there so the dog wouldn't be alone at night before she passed away. Daisy is a good kid with a big heart. People are more complicated than one bad episode. So if anyone is blaming a 10-year-old, it needs to stop. I keep my distance from drama, and I don't do theatrics. I have my own life, on the other side of the world, no less. The reality is, I live at least a 15-hour flight away. I can't just show up on their doorstep. Add in time zones and the fact that I don't have endless cash lying around, and it's a logistical nightmare for me to just whisk Daisy away for a trial trip or buy a mansion for her and her siblings to live in. My home is in remote, rural areas, no bustling cities or international schools where expat kids reinvent themselves every year. My job is demanding, and it's simply not an environment where I can parent from afar or have extra kids around. I thought I could ignore the social media nonsense Jenny and Jason have been throwing around. Their little campaign of vague status updates doesn't get to me, and initially, I didn't want to update anyone until I had all the facts. That was, until last weekend, when my brother called. On the line was Daisy, crying, absolutely distraught, and apologizing over and over, promising she'd be good and quiet, and that she didn't want to lose the chance to go on the trip. She kept saying she wanted to prove to everyone, me, my wife, and her parents, that she was a good person and not a bad kid. Her voice was so thick with guilt and sadness, it broke my heart to hear it. I tried to calm her down as best I could, reassuring her that both her aunts loved her and knew for a fact she wasn't a bad person. My brother grabbed the phone and, with an accusatory tone, basically said, "See what you've done," then hung up on me before I could say anything else. Of course, after he hung up, I called back, nothing. Texted my mom, and both my other siblings Jace and Jeff, trying to piece together what exactly was going on. By the next morning, I woke up to see yet another dramatic post from Jenny about cruelty to innocent children. It's classic deflection, but through my mom and Jeff, I finally got the full story. I still don't know exactly where all their money goes or how they managed to run through it so thoroughly, but Jenny and my brother's financial situation is dire. So dire that they're asking my mom and dad, who are on fixed incomes, for money to pay Daisy's tuition. Obviously, my parents can't help, and Jenny and my brother had to tell Daisy that she had to choose between going on vacation or staying at her school. Daisy picked school, but now, since Jenny's job search is going nowhere, they can't swing that either. I know it's easy to paint Daisy as this little troublemaker, but hearing that broke me. I won't get into it now, it makes me too angry, but for the record, the older 3 kids were always in public school, and it's always seemed like Daisy's tuition was being covered by Jenny's parents. Jeff filled me in on another layer. Daisy is getting older and more opinionated, and Jenny doesn't like that fact. When Daisy found out she couldn't go back to her school, she asked about the trip. And instead of explaining it honestly, Jenny told Daisy she couldn't go because she was bad. I can't even begin to unpack how cruel that was. Jeff admitted that things in the house aren't quite as bad as people imagine. According to him, Jenny is basically checked out, ignoring most of them except for her occasional outbursts, and drifting through the days. Jeff works a lot, and their other daughter Hannah has pretty much lived at her best friend's house all summer. I also want to clarify something about Daisy's older siblings. People keep worrying these poor kids live horrible lives, that they're broken and miserable, and vacations are their only source of joy. Yes, their situation is wildly unfair, and I feel for them deeply. But, from what Jace has told me, ever since Daisy was born, the kids have kind of just treated Jenny like a weird roommate their dad happens to be sharing a bed with, not like a mother figure. It's not a war zone of screaming matches. Instead, it's more like polite indifference. Despite everything, they all care a lot about Daisy, and they would never ask me to leave her behind on any trip. I'm the one who decided not to bring Daisy, because a trip like this would require a parent with her, and as Drill would say, I'd face God and walk backwards into hell before I ever invited Jenny, let alone paid for her, to come along. Update 2. Well, I thought things couldn't get more complicated. I was wrong. After that phone call with Daisy crying, I couldn't sleep for 3 days. My wife kept catching me staring at my laptop, drafting and deleting messages to Jason. Finally, she sat me down and said we needed to make a decision. Either we figure out a way to include Daisy, or we cancel the whole trip. She was right, but I still wasn't ready to cave to Jenny's manipulation. Then Jeff called me directly, which never happens. He's usually the quiet one, stays out of family drama. But he sounded different, older, tired in a way that made my chest tight. "Aunt Sarah," he said, "I need to tell you something, but you can't let anyone know I told you." The way he said it made my blood run cold. Turns out, Jenny hasn't been job hunting at all. She's been having an affair with her personal trainer, of all the cliché things. Jeff overheard her on the phone making plans to meet him, talking about how she deserves to be happy and how Jason never appreciated her anyway. But here's the kicker, the trainer is married too, and apparently his wife found out and threatened to expose everything to Jason unless Jenny ended it. Jeff said Jenny's been a wreck for weeks, which explains why she's been so checked out. She's terrified Jason will find out because, and I quote Jeff here, she knows Dad will actually leave her, this time since we're all old enough that he won't stay for the kids. But it gets worse. Remember how I mentioned their money problems? Well, Jeff did some digging, kid's always been too smart for his own good, and found out that Jenny's been using Daisy's college fund to pay for her gym membership, fancy dinners with the trainer, and God knows what else. That's why they suddenly can't afford Daisy's tuition. It's not bad investments from Jenny's parents, it's Jenny literally stealing from her own daughter. I was furious, but Jeff wasn't done. He told me that Daisy has been asking him why everyone seems angry at her lately, why her mom won't look at her, why she had to choose between school and the trip. This poor kid thinks she did something wrong when really, her mother has been embezzling her future. So now I'm sitting here with information that could blow up their family, watching my brother work himself into an early grave to support a woman who's not only cheating on him but stealing from their child. And meanwhile, Daisy, sweet, complicated Daisy, thinks she's the problem. I made a decision that my wife thinks is insane, but I can't live with myself otherwise. I called Jason and told him I'd changed my mind about the trip, that we'd take all 4 kids, including Daisy, but on one condition, Jenny doesn't come, and Jason needs to take some time off work to be a real parent for once. I told him I'd pay for his lost wages if necessary, but I wanted him to actually engage with his kids, all of them, for the week we're there. He was suspicious but agreed. I think he's so desperate to avoid conflict with Jenny that he'll say yes to anything. But here's what I didn't tell him. I'm not just planning a vacation, I'm planning an intervention. My wife thinks I'm overstepping, but I can't watch this family implode when there are 4 kids caught in the crossfire. During that week, when Jason is actually present and paying attention, I'm going to tell him what Jeff told me. I'm going to show him the bank records Jeff managed to find. And I'm going to make damn sure he understands that his precious second marriage is a sham built on lies and stolen money. Will it destroy their family? Maybe, but honestly, I think it's already destroyed. At least this way, maybe those 4 kids have a fighting chance at having one parent who actually puts them first. The trip is in 2 weeks. I've never been so nervous about a vacation in my life. Update 3. The trip happened. I wish I could say it went according to plan, but nothing in my family ever does. We picked up all 4 kids as scheduled. Jason actually took the week off, miracle of miracles, and for the first few days, things felt almost normal. Daisy was shy at first, clearly still thinking she was on some kind of probation, but by day 3 she was laughing with her siblings and helping Jeff navigate with the GPS. Hannah taught her how to skip stones at this little lake we stopped at, and Jace let her pick the music for a whole hour without complaining. Watching them together, I remembered why I love these kids so much. Jason seemed genuinely engaged too. He was asking them about school, their friends, actually listening to their answers instead of just nodding along. For a brief moment, I let myself believe maybe I wouldn't need to drop the bomb about Jenny after all. Maybe seeing his kids happy together would be enough to wake him up. I should have known better. On day 4, while the kids were at some local autumn festival, I finally sat Jason down. I'd been carrying Jeff's information like a lead weight in my stomach, and I couldn't wait any longer. I started gentle, asked him how things were really going at home, whether he'd noticed Jenny seemed distant lately. He got defensive immediately. Started with the usual excuses about stress, money problems, how hard it is being a blended family. But when I mentioned the missing money from Daisy's college fund, his face went white. "How do you know about that?" he asked. Turns out, he'd known about the missing money for weeks. He'd confronted Jenny, and she'd fed him some story about having to use it for emergency household expenses and that her parents would replace it once their investments recovered. He believed her, or wanted to believe her, because the alternative was too awful to consider. When I told him about the affair, he didn't even look surprised. Just deflated. Like I'd confirmed something he'd been trying not to think about. "The trainer," he said quietly. "Marcus. She talks about him constantly. How he gets her, how he makes her feel alive again." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. I thought I was being paranoid. I expected anger, shouting, maybe him storming off to confront Jenny. Instead, he just sat there looking like someone had let all the air out of him. "I can't do this again," he said finally. "I can't be the guy whose wife leaves him, especially not now, when Daisy's so young and the older kids are finally doing well. That's when I lost it. I told him he was being a coward, that he was failing all 4 of his children by staying with a woman who was stealing from them and lying to their faces. I reminded him that the older 3 had already survived 1 divorce and came out stronger for it. The conversation got heated. Voices were raised. And that's when Daisy walked into our rental cabin. She'd gotten tired at the festival and Jace had brought her back early. She heard us fighting and, being 10 years old and curious, she crept close enough to hear everything. The affair. The missing college money. All of it. The sound she made when she realized what we were talking about, it wasn't quite a gasp, wasn't quite a sob. It was the sound of a child's world breaking apart in real time. Jason and I both turned to see her standing in the doorway, tears streaming down her face. "Mom took my college money?" she whispered. I've never felt like such a complete failure as an adult as I did in that moment. This poor kid had already been convinced she was somehow at fault for all the family drama, and now she'd accidentally discovered that her mother had literally stolen from her future. Jason tried to go to her, but Daisy backed away from him. "Did you know?" she asked. "Did you know Mom took my money?" He couldn't lie to her face. "I found out recently," he admitted. "And you didn't stop her?" The silence stretched between them like a canyon. Jace appeared behind Daisy, having heard enough to understand something terrible was happening. Within minutes, Jeff and Hannah were back too, and suddenly all 4 kids knew everything. What happened next surprised me. The older 3 immediately rallied around Daisy, but not in the way I expected. Instead of being angry at Jenny, though I'm sure they were angry at Jason. Jeff, quiet Jeff who never confronts anyone, looked his father in the eye and said, "So you're just going to let her keep doing this to us?" "It's complicated," Jason started, but Jace cut him off. "It's not complicated, Dad. She's been treating us like shit for years, and now she's stealing from Daisy. If you don't leave her, you're just as bad as she is." Hannah nodded fiercely. "We're not little kids anymore. We don't need you to stay married to protect us, we need you to protect us from her." I watched my brother's face crumble as his children, all 4 of them, essentially gave him an ultimatum. Choose them, or choose Jenny. But not both. Not anymore. That night, after the kids had gone to bed, Daisy insisted on sleeping in Hannah's room, clinging to her big sister like a lifeline. Jason called Jenny. I couldn't hear her side of the conversation, but I could hear him. "I know about Marcus," he said simply. "And I know about Daisy's college fund." The silence on his end stretched for what felt like forever. Then, "No, I'm not coming home to discuss this. I want you out of the house by the time we get back." More silence. Then, in a voice I'd never heard from my brother before, calm, final, "You've been lying to me and stealing from our daughter. We're done, Jenny. We're finally done." He hung up and looked at me with tears in his eyes. I should have done this years ago, shouldn't I? The rest of the trip was strange. Sad but also, lighter somehow. The kids seemed relieved that the truth was finally out in the open. They started making plans. Daisy could transfer to their public school, they'd all help her adjust, maybe she could even try out for the same activities Hannah was in. But there's a problem I didn't see coming. When we got home yesterday, Jenny was still there. And she wasn't alone. Marcus was with her. In my brother's house. With his own suitcases. Apparently, Jenny had decided that if Jason was going to overreact to her moment of weakness, then she might as well go all in. She'd told Marcus everything, and he'd left his own wife to be with her. Now they're both claiming they have a right to stay in the house because Daisy needs stability and sudden changes are traumatic for children. Jason called me this morning, sounding defeated again. Jenny and Marcus have apparently consulted a lawyer and are claiming that since Jenny has been a stay-at-home parent, she has rights to the marital home during divorce proceedings. Jason's afraid that if he forces them out, it could hurt his custody case. So now my brother is sleeping in his own guest room while his wife and her affair partner have taken over the master bedroom. And Daisy is caught in the middle of it all, confused about why Uncle Marcus is suddenly living with them and why her parents won't talk to each other. The older kids are furious. Jace told me he's considering moving in with our parents until this gets sorted out. Jeff has been spending every night at friends' houses. Hannah's been staying with her best friend's family again. I'm supposed to fly home in 3 days, but I'm seriously considering extending my trip. Not because I want to get more involved in this mess, God knows I've done enough damage already, but because I'm terrified of what might happen to these kids if there's no sane adult around to advocate for them. My wife thinks I've lost my mind. Maybe I have. All I know is that I opened Pandora's box, and now 4 kids I love are living in hell because of it. Update 4. I thought the situation couldn't get any more insane. I was wrong. I ended up extending my stay for another week, and it's a good thing I did because everything went completely sideways. Jenny and Marcus had apparently gotten way too comfortable playing house in Jason's home. They were acting like some kind of power couple, making decisions about Daisy's schooling, rearranging furniture, and Marcus was even answering the door when people came by. The breaking point came when I went over to pick up some of Daisy's things she'd forgotten at the rental. Marcus answered the door wearing Jason's robe, and had the audacity to tell me that family visits need to be scheduled in advance now because they were establishing new boundaries for Daisy's emotional well-being. I pushed past him and found Jenny in the kitchen, drinking coffee from my mother's antique china set that she'd given Jason as a wedding gift. She looked up at me with this smug little smile and said, "Oh good, you're here. We need to discuss your inappropriate involvement in our private matters." That's when I noticed something that made my blood boil. On the counter was a stack of paperwork, enrollment forms for some expensive private academy across town. Jenny was planning to take Daisy and move her to a completely different school, presumably using what was left of Jason's money to pay for it. "You've got some nerve," I told her. "You steal from your daughter's college fund, cheat on your husband, and now you want to uproot her entire life for your convenience?" Jenny's mask slipped for just a moment, and I saw something ugly underneath. "Daisy is my daughter," she hissed. "Not yours, not Jason's siblings, not those other kids. Mine. And I'll do what's best for her." That's when Marcus decided to play white knight. He stepped between us and started lecturing me about respecting family dynamics and how I was clearly projecting my own issues onto their situation. This guy who'd been cheating with a married woman was trying to give me relationship advice. I was about to lose it completely when Daisy came down the stairs. She looked smaller somehow, like she'd been shrinking into herself over the past few days. She ran straight to me and wrapped her arms around my waist. "Aunt Sarah," she whispered, "can I come stay with you? Please. I don't like it here anymore." Jenny's face went white. "Daisy, sweetheart, you belong here with Mommy. Aunt Sarah lives very far away, and she's not equipped to take care of you." But Daisy shook her head and held onto me tighter. "I heard you and Marcus talking last night. You said I was baggage from your old life and that you wish Daddy would just take me so you could start over." The silence in that kitchen was deafening. Jenny looked like she'd been slapped, and Marcus actually backed up a step. I felt Daisy's little body shaking against me, and I realized this poor kid had been listening to her mother essentially wish her away. "That's not. I didn't mean." Jenny started, but Daisy cut her off. "Yes, you did. You've been mean to Jace and Jeff and Hannah for years, and now you're being mean to me too. I want to go with Aunt Sarah." I looked at Jenny and saw something I'd never seen before: panic. Real, genuine panic. Because she was realizing that her 10-year-old daughter had just called her out in front of witnesses, and there was no spinning this. Marcus tried to salvage the situation. "Kids misunderstand adult conversations all the time," he said. "I'm sure Jenny just meant, I know what she meant," Daisy said firmly. "And I know what you meant when you said I was another man's responsibility and that Mommy shouldn't have to deal with the complications. I wanted to record this conversation because I knew Jason needed to hear it, but more than that, I wanted to get Daisy out of there immediately." "Come on, sweetheart," I said. "Let's go pack some of your things." Jenny finally found her voice. "You can't just take her. I'm her mother. And you're doing a stellar job of it," I shot back. "Don't worry, I'll make sure Jason knows exactly what kind of mothering you've been doing." As we headed upstairs, I heard Marcus and Jenny start arguing in hushed voices. He was saying something about damage control and custody implications. She was crying, but they weren't tears of remorse, they were tears of someone who'd been caught and was trying to figure out how to minimize the consequences. While Daisy packed, she told me more things that made me sick. Apparently, Jenny had been telling her for weeks that if the divorce went through, Daisy would have to choose between staying with her or going with Jason and those other kids. She'd been essentially emotionally blackmailing a 10-year-old, making her feel like she had to pick sides. But the worst part? Jenny had been telling Daisy that if she chose Jason, she'd never see her mother again because Jenny was going to start fresh somewhere new with someone who actually loved her. I called Jason immediately. He was at work, but when I told him what had happened, he left a meeting and came straight over. The confrontation that followed was unlike anything I'd ever witnessed. Jason walked into his own house like he was going to war. When he saw Marcus lounging in his living room, something snapped. "Get out," he said quietly. "Get out of my house right now." Marcus started with some bullshit about how they were working together for Daisy's best interests, but Jason cut him off. "You're sleeping with my wife in my bed, wearing my clothes, and making decisions about my daughter. Get out." Jenny tried to intervene, but Jason turned on her with a look that could have melted steel. "And you? Did you really tell our daughter she was baggage? Did you really make her think she had to choose between her parents?" "It's not that simple," Jenny started. "It's exactly that simple," Jason said. "You've been emotionally abusing our child. Not just the older kids, our child. The one you claim to love so much." That's when Jenny made the biggest mistake of her life. She laughed. Actually laughed. "Oh please, Jason. Don't be so dramatic. Kids are resilient. She'll get over it." The look on Jason's face. I've never seen my brother look like that. Ever. "Get out," he said again, but this time his voice was shaking with rage. "Both of you, get out of my house right now, or I'm calling the police." Jenny's laugh died. "You can't make me leave. This is my home too." "No," Jason said, pulling out his phone. "This house is in my name only. You have no legal right to be here, and neither does your boyfriend. You have 10 minutes to get whatever you can carry, and then you're gone." What happened next was chaos. Jenny started screaming about her rights, Marcus was trying to de-escalate, and Daisy came running downstairs to see what the commotion was about. She took one look at the scene and ran straight to Jason. "Daddy," she said, and it was the first time I'd heard her call him that in years. "I want to stay with you." I don't want to go with mommy anymore. Jenny looked at her daughter like she'd been betrayed by her closest ally. Daisy, baby, you don't mean that. You're just confused. But Daisy shook her head and stayed pressed against Jason's side. I'm not confused. You said I was baggage. You said you wanted to start over without me. I heard you. And that's when Jenny completely lost it. She started screaming that Daisy was lying, that I had poisoned her against her own mother, that this was all some conspiracy to steal her daughter away. Marcus was trying to calm her down, but she was beyond reason. Jason called the police. They showed up 20 minutes later and, after hearing both sides, informed Jenny and Marcus that they needed to leave immediately. Jenny's threats about custody and her rights as a mother fell on deaf ears when the officers explained that adultery and emotional abuse don't exactly strengthen your case for primary custody. As they were leaving, Marcus carrying 2 hastily packed suitcases while Jenny ranted about getting a better lawyer, Jenny turned back to Daisy one last time. You'll regret this, she said to her own 10-year-old daughter. When you realize what you've thrown away, don't come crying to me. Daisy didn't respond. She just held on to Jason tighter. After they left, Jason broke down completely. He kept apologizing to Daisy, to me, to the universe in general for letting things get so bad. But Daisy surprised us both. It's okay, Daddy, she said. I know you were trying to keep everyone happy. But I'm happier now. The older kids came home that evening to find Jenny and Marcus gone and Daisy curled up on the couch with Jason, watching some Disney movie. The relief on their faces was palpable. But I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Because 30 minutes after Jenny left, Jason got a call from a lawyer. Not Jenny's lawyer, a different one. Apparently, Marcus's wife had been documenting everything, and she wanted to make sure Jenny faced consequences for destroying multiple families with her selfish behavior. It turns out Marcus's wife is a paralegal, and she's been building a case that could affect both Jenny's divorce settlement and her custody rights. She'd been recording phone calls, taking screenshots of credit card statements, the works. Jenny thought she was so smart, manipulating everyone around her. But she forgot that actions have consequences, and sometimes those consequences come from directions you never expected. The divorce papers were filed yesterday. Jason's lawyer thinks he has a strong case for full custody, especially with Daisy's own testimony about the emotional abuse. But here's the thing that's keeping me up at night. Jenny's not done. I can feel it. She's desperate now, backed into a corner with nowhere to go. And desperate people do desperate things. I'm extending my stay indefinitely.